And we're live. Welcome back to The George Show. My name is George, and this is part 2 of Richard Garriott. We're going to talk about Ultimate RPG in this part, and if you want to see the previous one, just click the link above us. But let's get on to Richard. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here with you again.
Yesterday, we talked about Ultimate Collector, Richard's new game on Facebook that's about collecting, near and dear to Richard's heart. You can play that game by clicking the link in the description below. Today, we're going to talk about Richard's future project, which is the spiritual successor to Ultima and Ultima Online. And for those who don't know, Richard is the man behind Ultima and the producer of Ultima Online. And now he's brought the band back together to create Ultimate RPG. Richard, tell us about this, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What's interesting, what we touched a little bit on yesterday was the fact that, at least for me, I find that Ultima is still a relatively unique role-playing game, both from the solo player era and especially in the massively multiplayer era, that, while clearly there's been lots of extremely high-quality role-playing games made over time, very few people have chosen to, what I'll call, follow in my footsteps with the type of what I'll call sandbox reality simulator, you might say, that I put into the Ultima series. And especially if you combine that with the heavy influence of things like virtue systems and stories that are enriching to the player versus just the quest to go kill the great dark lord, which is the standard role-playing game stories. Yeah. I think that I'm constantly pleasantly surprised that lots of developers have left me room in my own creation ecosystem to continue to innovate, and so I would like to claim some credit for being one of the first creators of computer-based role-playing games of any kind. Of course, originally those are solo-player games. And while there have been multiplayer games since computers could be hooked together, long ago, Ultima Online is credited as really being the first big, successful, massively multiplayer game. Kind of opened up a new genre, and the industry grew, really tenfold bigger on the heels of Ultima Online. And so this new Ultimate RPG that we're beginning work on now is what I hope will re-envision yet again and what a role-playing game might be here in the new era, where mobile devices are with you constantly, and things like web browsers give you global access to gaming environments throughout the day.
Right. No, it's a completely different platform, and like we touched on yesterday's interview, you mentioned how Ultima Online had that element of half of you could become adventurers, the other half could become crafters, blacksmiths, bakers, and I imagine that a lot of what Ultimate RPG will do is take that to the next level, combining
Exactly.
Ultimate Collector with all of these other things that are perhaps as enriching or even more so than adventuring for some.
Yeah, in fact, the way we're doing this is Portalarium. The role-playing game was always the target, the long-term target. But we first created really some casino games in order to just test out our backbone, to do that way we can do client and server and billing and synchronous sitting around synchronously at a poker table and asynchronously sending people gifts and messages. Then we moved up to Ultimate Collector, which means that we now have avatars and houses and secure trade between players. And again, we showed that we could have synchronous characters walking around on a map or asynchronous recording and playback of visitations onto people's maps. But of course, Ultimate Collector, as much as we like to think of it as, it almost is an RPG light, but in a very focused area of collecting and selling. It includes no magic, no outdoor map, no combat, those sorts of things, and so that we're kind of holding, and expanded what I'll call roles of activity. That's what's now going to come in, as well as what I'll call a completely different vision of art that overlays into Ultimate Collector. Wow. And one of the things I touched on briefly in the last interview, but I think bears repeating for this, is that I still think that one of the unique aspects of the virtual worlds that I've created compared to its competitors, I often describe, in the case of MMOs, that there was Ultima Online, and then there was pretty much everything else that I would describe as between EverQuest and World of Warcraft,
Right.
which I'm not knocking. I love them. I love and played the heck out of those myself.
Right.
But in almost every other role MMO, first and foremost, every player was generally speaking a combatant, and they might have some other activity they can do of some kind of crafting or creation capability. Whereas in Ultima, we had truly fully developed other roles. You could choose to be a baker or a farmer or anything, wide variety, expanding variety of other things that really were never involved in combat. And your impact in the world itself was persistent. So whether you were building a house or putting up a grave to a fallen friend, those things remain persistently part of the story of the world indefinitely into the future. And those are the things that I believe are still uniquely my teams to create. And more particularly, I think that because the variety of games that have already proven to be popular in social media, farming, cafes, pets, are independently already proving to be popular, that my team, I think, can bring those back together in a compelling new way for the RPG game.
That's awesome. Richard, we have also a lot of fans who have some questions specifically about this new game, and I'm going to read off some of them.
Great.
Actually, I'll start off with the most interesting one, which is talking a little bit about the tabula rasa, because we haven't touched on tabula rasa, but briefly for the viewers, this was Richard's second big game. Ultima Online was the first, Tabula Rasa was the second. Tabula Rasa, I was really surprised that they took it offline. Was it just they got tired of waiting for the game to be successful, or they had another game they wanted to invest in?
No, what's interesting about it, one of the main reasons we partnered with NCSoft at the very first, right as soon as we even announced Destination Games, we immediately partnered with NCSoft. And the reason is they were at the time, the only other company on Earth completely devoted to MMOs like we were.
I see.
And the Korean market for MMOs and now the Chinese market for MMOs are so much bigger than the US market that it hardly matters how successful you are in the United States. It's rarely consequential compared to the success they have going in Asia. And so in our case, it was just we thought we were doing fine. We were slowly scaling up, and again, if it had been left to our own accords, we would have continued to grow it.
Right.
But it was so far behind what they make with the hits they have, the instant hits they have in Korea. They just didn't have the patience for it.
I see. So they felt that you were just moving along too slowly. Interesting.
Yeah, I still think that the run we made at what I'll call introducing these more tactical, real-time elements in Tabula Rasa generated some really good ideas. In some ways it may have become a little too what I'll call arcadey or first-person shooter-like, but at least it did begin to at least make people think of it not as a tactical spreadsheet game. And so I believe there is learning from the real-time interactions that we and not only just real-time interactions, but also the control point flag control that we will revisit again even in the new game to see how we think we can best support ideas like that.
Well, I really look forward to that. I mean, every game is a learning experience from the previous one. One game that I really felt interested in was Terra, because they had a new combat system. Like, you finally had to move and dodge and get out of the way. No more tab targeting and using the environment as part of your tactics. I was so excited by that, and creating another combat system that isn't min-maxing focused, that isn't just based on gear, but is based on skill and your particular preference for a play style. I think that's fantastic.
Right, and it's difficult. It's a difficult needle to thread in the sense of, but you articulated this, I think, the same way I feel about it, which is that you really want to make sure you're thinking about it not being the fastest clicker, not being the spreadsheet optimizer, but that
Right.
you're really thinking about the play environment, and so therefore you're engaged in thinking about what's happening around you. That's what you're really looking for is mental engagement, and that's what I think is so lost in a lot of these just tab to target, and now let me do my 3 or 4 keystrokes that I might even have macroed to optimize the damage that I do. For me,
Exactly.
that's just not as interesting as something that I'm really still engaged in thinking about while it's unfolding.
Right. And I mean, being able to set traps, being able to do creative things like I remember in EverQuest, one of the ways that an enchanter could solo mobs is they would first charm the mob, then they would give it some really heavy object, and then because the mob is encumbered, he would be really slow moving. So when they uncharmed him and started bashing on him, he's like just slugging along like a snail. A
Right.
creative use of game mechanics.
Right. Oh, yeah. If I can diverge into a little side story, it interesting that people clever use of game mechanics is both the joy and bane of a creator.
Yes.
When you create these MMOs. For me, one of the most interesting stories came from one time early in Ultima Online. I was, as a lot of our team was, I was involved in the help queue. So when people were crying out for help, I would show up myself and help people out.
Help! Help! I'm
And,
stuck.
exactly. So I would go off and to help these people. And one person came to help was this woman who said, "Look, I just started playing. I've restarted now. This is my 3rd time restarting. Each time I start, this guy comes by and he steals all my stuff, runs off, and then I'm immediately killed. I'm not having any fun. I'm about to quit your game forever."
Right.
And I said, "Okay, well that's reasonable. Let me help you out here. I'll shepherd you here out of town, and if he comes by, I'll take care of it." And as we walk out of the town, sure enough, here comes this thief, zips by. I don't know how he's even doing this so fast. He steals everything she's got and then disappears off the other side of the screen. And I say, whoa, stay here. I'll be right back. So I teleport ahead and I find that guy and I freeze him to the ground and I say, "Hey," and I turn myself into Lord British and I say, "Hey, you bad thief." Said, how dare you prey on this poor young woman who's just trying to have a good time? You're really spoiling the fun. Do it again, and I'm going to kick you out of the game. And he says, "Oh, Lord British, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again." I said, "Okay, let that be a lesson to you." I go back to the woman, give her her stuff back, say, "Don't worry, it's not going to happen again." And while I'm there telling her that, zip, the same guy comes by, steals her stuff. I chase him down. I say, "Look, I said don't do it." He says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Lord British. I'm so sorry. I did it twice, I know, but I just couldn't resist. It was just too funny. But trust me, I won't do it again." I said, "Okay, the next time I really am going to ban you." And go back to the woman, give her stuff back. Sure enough, 3rd time, guy comes by. I freeze him and I say, "Okay, look, I'm going to ban you now." And he says, "Look, Richard Garriott," he said, "just like you play Lord British in this game, I am playing a thief. And as a thief, when the king comes by and tells me not to steal, of course I'm going to tell him I'll never do it again. But by the way, you put the rules into the game that allow me to do this stealing, and I'm a character who plays a thief. So I'm role playing exactly as I'm supposed to. So quit giving me a hard time." And I went, "Oh shit, he's right." And so I teleported him all the way to the other side of the world where he couldn't mess with this particular woman anymore, gave the woman her stuff back, and then went off to think about, okay, I realized people are playing, you can't blame the people. They're playing with the rules and the systems as you've defined them within the world.
Right.
And so it was a very important lesson to me to figure out about, how do you make sure you create rules and you shepherd behavior in the way that not only maximizes the fun for the individual playing, but also means that the things they enjoy doing create collateral fun versus suffering for especially new players.
Right. How many skeletons do you hide in Britannia Manor? And are the bones of the famous assassins of Lord British from UO Beta among them?
Oh, how funny! So the bones of Reigns, the person who assassinated me with a fire field at the close of the beta, sadly his bones are not yet part of my dungeon. However, if I ever manage to track down, his living or dead corpse, that will be high on my list to include. However, interestingly, yes, there are quite a few cadavers and skeletons and things in Britannia Manor. I would say if I try to put a count to it, there's 3 whole human skeletons, a mummified hand, a human fetus, 3 shrunken heads, an Egyptian, I think I said the mummified hand from Egypt, and many others. You know, I've got a few human hearts and various other parts and pieces. So yeah, there's lots of human remains laying around here.
That's a little scary, but that's awesome to have a unique collection. That was asked by Tobias Brendel.
Yeah.
He's our vice president here at TGN.
Yes.
Good question, Tobias. We had another question, and that was focused on the overall nature of the game. So in Ultimate RPG, there's going to be a story, there's going to be settings, there's going to be a look and feel, there's going to be music. It'll have some elements, as you described, of strategy as well as action, but not too much action and not too much strategy. But again, can you be more specific? So if someone wanted to get a sense for the game, how would you, what kind of environment or ambiance would you describe Ultimate RPG as?
Well, let me give you there's two parts of that I interpret, one of which I will call the visual aesthetic of the environment, and then one is what I will call the play dynamic and pace of play dynamic. And let me kind of address those separately. So first, from a visual standpoint, sadly I'm not going to give you much of an answer, even though I have the answer in development. But I'll give you the context for the answer, which is that what I'm also trying to do in this case is create I'm not going back to the fictional worlds that I've played in the past. I'm building a new fictional world, and with that new fictional world comes a new look and feel that I'm hoping will be neither so radically different and strange that people can't relate to it, but nor do I hope it is what I'll call pedestrian and reused like so many of the other classical medieval worlds of the past. And so I'm working very hard to craft something that is both familiar and yet also more unique. And we have that well underway. We've got a conference room in the office that is completely plastered with the concept sketches of the new world. And as soon as I feel confident enough that we've got it all together and perhaps generated a few, in-game art examples to where we can showcase the visuals of the game itself, then I'll let that be seen publicly. Right. But if you then go back to the play environment, if you go, what's it going to feel like to live in this world? I would actually say go back to my traditional works. Go back to the 9 solo player games that I've made and the 2 massively multiplayer games that I've made. Average them together, and you won't be far off. So I'm hoping to really stick with my roots, if you know what I mean. I'm not. Right. I'm not here to go make someone else's game. I'm here to make a Lord British game. And as such, I believe people will find it to be a very familiar environment if they are followers of my work for the last 30 years.
Okay, no, I mean that's very good to know that you aren't trying to just do something completely different. And I'm sure fans, and we have a lot of fans, all of Stratics.com is about Ultima Online, and I can't tell you how many people expressed so much interest now that they learned you're making a new game, that when can I try it? When can I play it? So of course that's the next question. Are there any timelines?
Yeah. So sadly, no, there's not a timeline yet. But what's interesting about this new era is the new era of what I'll call web-based and mobile-based activities is that we can really begin to let people in a lot earlier than we used to.
Right.
Even Ultimate Collector right now, for example, it's not finished, but we already have people in and playing it because A, we can, and B, it helps us really make sure we're making the game that the people play the way we think they play it. They want to play it, right. And so it lets us kind of fine tune and wrap it up in a way that is most successful and most attractive to the players. And so I'm sure we'll do that also with the role-playing game. But even backing up just a hair, that's why I like describing it as the spiritual successor to my previous work, is because I think that it's shocking how that no one else has kind of either taken up the mantle of with the proper Ultima name on it, either at EA, nor really have people outside in the rest of the diverse development world really kind of targeted it directly and kind of beat it at its own game.
Right.
And so if there's anybody who should be able to beat me at my own game, so to speak, I hope it's me.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, we look forward to it, and I know we're going to have a lot of unhappy faces because you cannot share much more than what we've just described about the game yet. But when you can, I hope we can maybe do another follow-up interview to share more about Ultimate RPG.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Richard, before we end this part, is there anything else you'd like to add to the viewers about the game or about yourself?
Well, yeah, there is one thing I think we have kind of almost touched on, but haven't ever stated really quite so directly, which is, you've heard me kind of describe these three grand eras of games. Solo player games, followed by a great increase in the player base for MMOs, and now the third grand era, which I'll call this blending of somewhere between mobile and social. Right. And while Ultimate Collector is a social media first game followed very quickly by mobile, yes. By the time we get to Ultimate RPG, we actually expect the reverse to be the case. So, and this is a bias not only by me as a player, but also where I think the market is really going. I actually, for me as a player, to be honest, the vast majority of my personal game playing takes place on this device. Much less the yes. pad that's behind me on the charging stand, and so. So that's where I actually do play. That's where I want to play. That's where I found, I am more of a gamer now than I have been in any point in time in my 30 years of history in this industry, and it's almost exclusively on mobile platforms. I'm a devout believer in the continuous access to entertainment that is provided by these mobile devices, and the quality level of the power and quality of graphics and user interface they now provide. And so with the RPG, I expect you'll find it on mobile first, but then followed shortly thereafter by web and social media and other ways you might be able to consume it.
I mean, that's a very different focus. I've never played a mobile RPG because you need so much of that interface. So I'm really interested to hear how you're going to fit all that goodness into this little screen.
Yep, and I agree with the challenge. I also, by the way, if you look at the games that I play on these little guys, it's my favorites are probably the tower defense style of games, right. And then a few other kinds of what I call puzzle games. But I don't really have on here any true role-playing game that I've had as a true favorite. That I have folders, my A games, B games, and C games. I have no role-playing games in my A game folder, and I hope to fix that myself.
That's a wonderful goal. You become your own best customer.
Absolutely.
And everybody else as well.
I hope so.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching this episode of The George Show. Tomorrow, we're going to cover Richard in Space, where we talk about Richard's trip to space, as well as commercializing spaceflight, potentially creating a service where everyone can buy a ticket, like you go to France, but you choose to go to the space station. Richard, you've been an amazing guest. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very kindly.
Take care, guys. Have fun. This video is part of the Way movement, a career path in video sponsored by TGN. To learn more, visit tgn.tv.